recorded. That was wonderful. Okay, so just to let everyone know, we're going to be recording the meeting, and we're going to start now. And I'll just start. It's a quick little few minutes of introduction, and then we're just going to get right to the meeting. So I want to welcome everybody. Wish you a good evening. Happy Valentine's Day. And thank you so much for joining the Fidalgo Democrats on Zoom. My name is Barbara Cooper, and I'm the chair of the Fidalgo Dems. The Fidalgo Democrats are an independent democratic association with a focus on education. I'd like to start the meeting with an acknowledgement. We, the Fidalgo Democrats, acknowledge that we gather on indigenous land, the traditional territory of the Coast Salish people, specifically the Samish and Swinomish people, and pay our respects to elders past, present, and future. Our next meeting will be March 8th, and we will continue to meet via Zoom. We have invited Steve Hobbs, who's the new Secretary of State, and I just heard from his staff and him. He is available, so our next meeting will have him as a presenter. I'm going to do a quick, just ask if anyone, if we have any elected officials or Democratic Party officials here, including the PCOs. Please let me know, and please introduce yourself.
But Barbara, I'll start if I may. I'm the lead safety at PCO Precinct 119 in Dewey Beach.
Great, thank you. Okay, don't see any other people jumping in, so I don't know, sometimes people are kind of quiet about that. I do want to thank a couple of people. I want to thank Don Ambrose for putting out the Skagit Democrats newsletter. And I also wanted to thank Carolyn and Rich Tamler for putting out the Whidbey newsletter. We get two fantastic newsletters from people. It's a ton of work. So thank you both, or all three of you, for all your work. I don't see anybody that I'm aware of who's running for public office. If there is, please let me know, because people are coming in. So, okay.
Rick is.
What's that? Okay. Before we start the presentation, I'd like to mention a few things. Just our Zoom host is Brad Kloor of the Skagit Democrat Zoom support team. He's handling the muting and unmuting and other technical issues. He'll probably mute us all now, and then that eliminates background noise. If it gets too noisy, we do that. I'll explain the muting, unmuting once we have questions and hand raising. Just again, the meeting is being recorded. Rita Sullivan is our YouTube video person. Brad sends her the information and she puts it out. And we often get a lot of folks listening to our meetings on YouTube. People that don't come to the meetings, we get quite a few. So that's really will become very non-human, not in person. A lot of technical stuff now. And so I'd like to, if there's nothing else, I'm going to move on to Representative Rick Larsen. And I'm just going to do a real quick introduction. I think we all know him. He's spoken to the Democrats multiple times in the past. Thank you very much for the past when you came as well. So Rick was born and raised in the 2nd District. He is married and has 2 sons. And he is 5 generations of Larsens have lived in this district. Quite impressive. And he represents Washington State's 2nd Congressional District, which includes portions of Swinomish, Skagit, and Whatcom counties, and all of Island and San Juan counties. There's about 760,000 people in the 2nd District. So that's a lot of people. And I'm going to mention a few. He serves on several committees. He's on the House Transportation and Infrastructure Committee and the House Armed Services Committees. These committees enable Rick to focus on creating jobs and opportunities to meet the local needs of Northwest Washington. I'm going to let him explain exactly what the committees do, but I'm going to do a few more things. He's also chair and the most senior Democratic member of the Aviation Subcommittee. And this subcommittee is critical to jobs and the economy in Washington State and the 2nd District. We have to remember the 2nd District is home to both the Naval Station in Everett and the Naval Air Station on Whidbey Island. Rick is also the co-chair of the bipartisan U.S.-China Working Group, which educates members of Congress about the U.S.-China issues through meetings and briefings with academic, business, and political leaders from the U.S. and China. China is the largest and most rapidly growing export market for Washington State. And 40% of all jobs in Washington State are tied to trade. So that's a really interesting dynamic. Rick also co-founded the Congressional Arctic Working Group, a bipartisan group to help bring more focus to U.S. policy issues related to the Arctic. And again, that's a really important issue right now and an important environmental issue. So thank you. Is there anything else that you would like to add to that before you start?
No, I'll just, no, that's plenty. Thanks.
Okay, so thank you for all you do, and I'm going to turn the meeting over to Rick Larsen.
Yeah, thanks, Barbara. And so what I thought I'd do is provide some comments and then turn it back over to Barbara, and if you could moderate the Q&A, because I certainly want folks to have an opportunity to ask questions. But I prefer if someone else moderated that, so it'd just be easier for me. In this environment. So yeah, well, thanks. And thanks to the Fidalgo Democrats for, I appreciate the invitation to speak to you tonight for a little bit about what's going on in Congress. I do want to start though on the political side a little bit. Barbara mentioned there's 760,000 or so people in the 2nd District. And as you know, every 10 years after the census, that triggers a redistricting. And so the redistricting maps are now adopted for Congress and for the House of Representatives. And for Congress, the 2nd District now will look next year a little bit more like it looked in the 2000s when I first represented this area, in that all of Skagit and all of Whatcom will be in the 2nd Congressional District, and including San Juan and Island counties. And then in Snohomish County is where there's a bigger difference compared to the 2000s, where I will be representing largely the west side of I-5 in Snohomish County, except for Everett, Everett, sort of the city of Everett tips over on the east side of I-5 as does Linwood as well. So a very different shaped district. And for Sue Weingarten, I will no longer, knocking on wood that I win this fall, I will no longer be representing my hometown of Arlington. Fortunately, I live in Everett now, and so that will be in the 2nd District, but I will not be representing my mom. And she about throttled me when I told her that. And I told her that I can give her the number of the Redistricting Commission and she can throttle them. So the district will be a little bit different. And it shifts from a pretty good, it's still a good Democratic performing district, the new 2nd District that I'm running in, but it's still, they did get more Republicans relatively. So it went from about a 63% Democratic performing district to about a 58% Democratic performing district, something like it was in the 2000s. But the truth is that the Republican base is much larger. It's going to be about 40% or so. And I know from 22 years of experience in running in this district that Republicans turn out and vote for Republicans. They don't turn out and vote for independents. They don't turn out and vote for Democrats. The Republican base is always really strong in the primary. The Democratic base, not so much. And so we have a lot of work to do through the primary to get out to these new areas like North Whatcom and East Skagit County and Mount Vernon to do some outreach, identify Democrats, and ensure that they understand the lines have changed. And I'm running in the race. I expect to be facing a Republican this fall, but we have our work to do in these newly returned areas to the second district. And so that's some of the politics around redistricting in Washington State as it impacts you all. If you live on Fidalgo, it doesn't impact you at all. You were in the second district. You are going to be in the second district. It's mainly an impact on my campaign as we have to do outreach to new areas. That said, I think we have a good message and things to pitch to people. And I want to shift a little bit now to what's going on in Congress. I think, we as Democrats, we're better off never better off criticizing what we haven't done, but we're really good at criticizing what we haven't done. What we're not as good at is emphasizing and promoting what we have done, and we have done quite a bit. In 2021, the economy created over 6 million jobs. It's the fastest job creation in 50 years since the Kennedy administration. Unemployment claims, as we all know, were sky high right at the beginning of the pandemic. Unemployment claims, new monthly unemployment claims are now down below the levels that we had in 1969. The unemployment rate dropped to, it's now 4% nationally. It was 3.9% last month. And that was, it went below 4% about 2.5, 3 years earlier than most people expected, most economists expected. So there is, real positive momentum in the economy, in creating jobs and people getting back to work. We do have headwinds though, and we certainly don't want to deny those, especially when it comes to inflation and price increases that are impacting people, whether it's groceries or drug costs, housing costs. And I'm old enough to remember, and I'm just not to date anyone here, but I think most of us are. The last time we saw inflation like this, anywhere close to this, was the late 70s and early 80s. It still isn't as high as it was then, but it's certainly high compared to what people have experienced over the last decade. And we have to do a better job at addressing that concern in people's minds, because there is a positive side of this economy that is that people are being able to take advantage of, create an opportunity for them. And yet there's still some headwinds that women and men and families face in this economy as well. So that, I think, is something will be debated this fall. But we did pass the American Rescue Plan last year. It was, again, a real positive. It's called the American Rescue Plan because the plan was to rescue America. And it largely did rescue America from the worst parts of the pandemic. We saw the poverty rate among children in this country drop nearly by 40% because of the child care tax credit extension, or a child care tax credit expansion in the American Rescue Plan. We saw many more shots in arms so that we can move to double vaccinations and booster shots because of the funding of the American Rescue Plan. You talk to your smaller communities, including Anacortes, and they'll talk, those elected officials will talk about the use of American Rescue Plan dollars to support small businesses with small business grants to keep doors open and keep smaller businesses alive, get through the pandemic. You talk to aviation companies. Barbie mentioned Boeing in the district. It's great to have the women and men who work at Boeing in the district. It's even better to have all those smaller companies run by women and men throughout this region who support the manufacturing of airplanes. And my bill, my bipartisan bill, the Aviation Manufacturing Jobs Protection Act, was part of the American Rescue Plan. And we just recently went through a third round of funding, and that bill saved just in aviation saved about 30,000 jobs, over 30,000 jobs nationally, and about 3,000 to 4,000 jobs here in the state. We did lose some jobs, and there's no doubt about it. We couldn't stop that from happening, but we also protected a lot of aviation jobs, a critical part of our economy, and frankly, critical part of the life of the women and men I get to represent and have the privilege to represent. So the American Rescue Plan passed. We passed the infrastructure bill, the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. The president signed into law in November, and the state legislature is debating a transportation bill now that is starting to put some of that federal money to work. I tell my staff we need to stop patting ourselves on the back for passing a job-creating bill. We need to see jobs being created in transportation, and the state legislature is using some of those federal dollars to help fund this transportation bill. It includes an investment in electrifying the state's ferry system to pull those diesel emissions out of the air from our ferries. It includes electrifying our transit systems. So the city of Everett and Bellingham's Whatcom Transit Agency and the Skagit Transit Agency can begin looking at moving forward to electrify their bus fleet, pulling emissions out of the air, helping to keep our air cleaner. And frankly, not even moving into the future on transit. The present is electric buses. And so helping our local transit agencies make that transition. And it's all part of the bigger picture of fighting climate change. And that's where there's some work left to do, including the passage of the Build Back Better bill. Let no newspaper, let no cable show tell you the Build Back Better bill is dead. It's only dead until we say it's dead. And even though there's all this stuff about Joe Manchin and Kristen Sinema over in the Senate, whom I do not control, and no, I will not be calling either of them to tell them they need to get their act together. I don't live in their states. The people in their states are doing a fine job of that. But we did pass a Build Back Better bill that included the single largest investment in fighting climate change in the history of this country. And that doesn't mean we're going to get all of it, but it does mean that the Senate, it does mean the Senate does have something on their plate that they can still deal with. And I would expect that sometime in mid-March, we're going to be returning, the Senate will be returning to Build Back Better, because there's a lot of good stuff in it. We're going to limit copays of insulin drugs to $35 out-of-pocket cost. Otherwise, we're going to give Medicare the ability to control drug costs. We're going to expand the child care tax credit. We're going to build 1 million more affordable housing units in the country, including here in the Pacific Northwest, using our great agencies like Opportunity Council and the Skagit County Housing Authority and Housing Hope here in Snohomish County. And we're going to do that because Democrats are in the majority. And I'll just end on this point and then open it up. We're in the majority, and we need to keep the majority. We need to fight for the majority this fall. That includes continuing the fight for voting rights legislation. I voted for voting rights legislation here in the House of Representatives. I voted for the John Lewis Act. I voted for the People Act, for the People Act. I have done my job, and I'm continuing to do my job to fight for voting rights. I have found in my time in Congress that fighting for voting rights is not a one-time thing. It is an everyday thing. And I think we're all we all knew that and understand that even more so. And so I'll continue to fight for voting rights, to lower the barriers to voting, while at the same time we increase the penalties for voter fraud. Because frankly, we also know the biggest perpetrators of voter fraud tend to be Republicans. The record's pretty clear on that. So I'm all for high penalties for voter fraud, but there should be high penalties while we lower access to the ballot box, lower the barriers to access the ballot box. So with that, Barbara, there's a lot going on, a lot of issues. Spencer is here. Spencer Lively is here with me to take some notes, and where I your questions, but he'll take some notes and we'll get back to you, Barbara, so that by March 8th in your next meeting, you can report back about any questions I couldn't otherwise answer. So with that, I'll turn it back over to you.
Okay, wonderful. Just to start with, Spencer put in your website where if you want to help Rick with his campaign, Spencer put in the website where you can go, as well as how you can contact him directly to help if you're interested. So that's in the chat. And it's pretty, your website is very easily accessed. We're going to have questions. People can make comments. Here is some of the technology things we need to talk about. You can unmute yourself. There's a little microphone icon on the lower left of your screen. And when there's an arrow through it, it means you're muted. So just click on that and you can unmute. The other thing is there's a hand raising emoji. And if you look again at the bottom of your screen, you see a little word reactions. And it's got a little on my screen, it's a little smiley face. And when you click on that, I'm going to click on it right now, you'll see a bunch of emojis. And the very first one is, on mine, it's the second one. It's a little thumbs up, a hand raising. At the bottom, there's a word, it just says, it looks like this, and it says raise hand. So it's pretty basic stuff. So that is kind of the easiest way to do it. And the computer itself pushes you to the front so that I can stay in line with who wants to ask questions. If you're having any computer problems, let me know, and Brad can take you off and work with you off screen. So I'm going to open it up to questions right now. If anyone would like to ask Representative Larsen any questions. Okay, right now I see somebody is raising their hand. Marshall Goldberg, you're muted, so unmute yourself. And then there he goes.
Thank you, Barbara. And thank you, Rick. I appreciate the stand you've taken. There's so many things to talk about, but I'm going to talk about one thing that probably affects all of us on all of this. That can you hear me?
Marshall?
Yes, can you hear me?
I can hear Marshall fine.
Okay, Barbara, Rick can hear me. Okay, I'm unmuted. I think one issue that affects everybody on this call, I think most of us are Medicare age. I believe most of us in this call are Medicare age. And
Not all of us.
Not all of us. Oh, sorry about that. But I'm hearing more and more about direct contracting entities.
Mhm.
And I would like you to talk a little bit about Medicare direct contracting programs and frankly, where you stand on it. From what I understand, it doesn't sound like for those of us who are in traditional Medicare, it would be to our advantage to have that program. So please talk about that.
Yeah, thanks, Marshall. So I oppose DCEs, direct contracting entities. I sent a letter to Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services. I approved the letter today to get it sent probably today or tomorrow to the director of the what we call shorthand CMS, the Center for Medicaid and Medicare and Medicaid Services, outlining the concerns I've heard and requesting that they answer my letter as well as cease DCEs. So I don't want to get too much into the details of DCEs, so I don't support them. So I don't want to sound like I know enough to make it sound like I support them. I want to be clear about that. But direct contracting entities are the way to describe it is that Medicare has designated a certain number. It's up in the 50 to 55 range number of healthcare entities or other entities to be DCEs. The idea, the concept behind a DCE is that it would receive a certain amount of money per Medicare enrollee, per Medicare patient. And then within that collection of money, manage the cost of the healthcare for all of those folks who are enrolled in the DCE. The criticisms, that's just a flat out description. The main criticism is that potentially the the DCE could preserve 40% of that total amount of dollars for non-healthcare provision, profit, administration, anything. I mean, the incentive is to not provide healthcare through a DCE, as opposed to what we want to see to happen is Medicare be used to promote health and promote health among the senior its population that it's serving. And the DCE is really the opposite of that. It actually doesn't achieve that at all. The incentive is to not pay for healthcare at all. So that's the main criticism. There's only one DCE that I'm aware of in the area, and that is at Peace Health Bellingham. The Peace Health system is made up of several healthcare systems and several hospitals. It is headquartered in Vancouver, Washington State, and Peace Health in Bellingham is one of its hospitals and one of its healthcare systems. But Peace Health is the only healthcare system, I think, in Western Washington participating. So if you were to go to Providence Hospital, the system that Providence is part of is not participating in DCE. So it's not every healthcare system, and it's not every Medicare beneficiary, but it is some of them, and some of them live in my district. So the other problem that we have with DCEs is that the enrollee, the person who's on Medicare, if they're already, say, receiving Medicare from a physician who is part of the network in which part of the DCE's physician network, then that patient is automatically enrolled in the DCE. So they call it an opt-in by attribution, I think is a term. And I told them, I said, that's not an opt-in system. There's no opt-in by attribution. You either opt in or you opt out. You either choose to go in or you choose to go out. You don't get to go in because you're already connected to a physician. That's not opting in. That's capturing people. And so that's been another problem, is that people have been enrolled as part of to be DCE beneficiaries within Medicare without knowing it. And so that's been another problem. So that's where it all sits right now. I will back up a little bit. The Trump administration started the DCEs. The Biden administration so far has continued them, and part of the effort here is to tell the Biden administration to knock it off. I do want to dispel a myth that's out there. Some of the opponents of DCEs, and again, this is a criticism of the opponents of DCEs. They say, and Congress can't do oversight, and Congress can't stop these things. Let's just be clear, that's a ridiculous assertion, that when there's a federal tax dollar used on something, that Congress has no oversight or Congress can do nothing. We actually can. That's when we can do something. So this letter I wrote is one part of what I want to do to express my opposition to the administration. That's oversight. And there have already been at least one hearing in the Senate on this. That's oversight. And we collectively could try to stop these DCEs, but it doesn't mean it will happen. But I just want to be clear to folks that when someone writes that and Congress doesn't have oversight over this, that's just not. There's a lot of things wrong with DCEs. One of them is not the lack of the ability of Congress to do either oversight or try to stop these DCEs. So that's kind of long and short, Marshall, of it. I want to let you know, be really clear that I've communicated the criticisms that I've heard and concluded that I need to oppose the DCEs, and I've let the administration know that.
Okay. Thank you very much. That's
Thank you.
an issue.
Yeah.
Marshall, do you have any follow-up, any other questions about that?
Well, I just want to let people know, from what I understand, we know that roughly 40% of Medicare eligible people are already enrolled in Medicare Advantage. If you're in Medicare Advantage, you're familiar with that program. And from what I've read, in Medicare Advantage, the people who administer it can hold back 15%, whereas in this program with DCEs, they can hold back 40%, as Rick said. So, and the people who are in traditional Medicare are being automatically enrolled in DCEs if they fall within that district. So that's why this is such a significant change.
To be clear, if you're a Medicare enrollee on fee for service and your primary healthcare physician is a physician that's in the DCE's network of physicians, then you are being automatically enrolled. That's that opt-in by attribution, which I think is a bunch of crap. So it's a little bit different than the way you described it. I just want to be sure it's accurately described, because it really does have an impact on how we want to attack this. So just to be clear.
Yeah, my concern is that many of us are on traditional Medicare, Rick, and we really like it. Okay, we have a lot of advantages, and we don't want to lose what we have, in essence.
I'm in. I'm all in.
Okay, thank you for that.
Thank you very much. Okay, that's an interesting issue that sometimes is under the radar for a lot of folks. So thank you. And thanks, Marshall. Does anyone else want to raise their hand? Go to reactions and just press the hand raising button, and there you go. So please feel free to ask questions so we can get some things clarified, as long as we have someone here to help us. Thank you, Rick, for coming again.
Yeah, sure.
Looks like Philippe. Philippe, are you?
Hi, Barbara. I'm sorry. I'm going to put the congressman on the spot right now. Congressman, my name is Philippe.
I doubt it. Go ahead.
I shook your hand a number of times. I'm a fan and supporter. I'm in your district.
Yeah.
I wrote you a few times. My question is about foreign policy and what is going on with QAnon and the Proud Boys and the others. The first comment I have is I'm totally disappointed with the Biden administration's nonsense in the Ukraine. This is totally inhumane, illegal, and it is a total nonsense.
Oh, what's inhumane and illegal?
What is he and the Pentagon is doing in the Ukraine? They're training these operatives to start a war so they can go ahead and pull Russia into it to punish it for some unreasonable. And this is very, very unfortunate. And unfortunately for us, the Democrats, this is not an abstract issue. Biden's popularity is dropping by the day, and I guarantee you it's going to be a hell of a ride trying to re-elect him in 2024 if he doesn't straighten it out. So my request from you is to whisper into Nancy Pelosi's ear and say, please go tell the president to stop this nonsense. I mean, just today, a few minutes ago, they showed the Ukrainian president. He says, guys, we don't want this. We don't want, the United States to empty their embassies, their consulates. And they show this 80-year-old woman with an AK, whatever it is. Who do you think is paying for her? And I'm sorry, I mean, he's putting us.
Do you have an answer for that, Alan?
Yeah, please. I have another question. If I
no. Do you have an answer for that? You asked, who do you think is paying for that? Who do you think is paying for that weapon?
It is the State Department, Congressman.
Okay. All right.
It is the State Department.
Okay. What's your next question?
Okay. The next question is, who do you think is financing all this QAnon, Proud Boys, and all of the others to create all this nonsense? Do you have an answer for that? And again, I'm sorry. I just I'm very.
Yeah. First off, I never, if I define taking questions as every time as being put on the spot, I'd constantly be put on the spot. So I don't feel put on the spot. This is my job to answer questions. But I will say this: it's my job to answer your questions with my answers. So be empathetic to everyone, to where you're coming from on all issues. But I'll give you my answer. And my answer is that you are completely wrong when it comes to the Biden foreign policy on Russia. The nonsense here is perpetrated by Putin, not by Biden. After the end of the Cold War, we had an open door policy, and we have an open door policy when it comes to NATO. And NATO didn't move west. I'm sorry, NATO didn't move east. These countries moved west. They turned their backs on 70 years of Soviet occupation and chose to want to come west. You ask the Baltics if they feel they're in a better position despite what's even going on today, and they'll tell you. You ask Poland that. You ask Romania. I was in Poland. I was in Lithuania. I was in Romania. I was in Ukraine. All four countries. I was in Germany as well last August to first talk to NATO partners and then talk to Ukrainians as well. There's no love lost for Russia there in these countries among the leadership and even among the new German leadership. So I frankly, I just reject this thought that Biden is somehow, and the Biden team is somehow ginning this up. Ask the Ukrainians who invaded their country. Ask Ukrainians who they think acted illegally. And it's Russia. Russia invaded Ukraine in the Donbass and Crimea, and it's U.S. policy to not recognize and never recognize Crimea as part of Russia. Ukraine is a separate country with a separate language. I had a young woman who worked for me. She was born in Rostov, which is a town near Ukraine. It's on a river that empties into Sea of Azov. She speaks Russian, she speaks Italian, she speaks French, she speaks English, but she grew up in Bellingham. She went to the University of Washington, and I asked her, so I said, can you understand Ukrainian? You're kind of close to Ukraine when you grew up and you speak fluent Russian. She goes, no, Ukrainian, it's a foreign language to me. It's a different language. It's a different people. It's a different country. And it's not Russian. And that's not how Putin sees it. So I've been really clear about this, and I'm unapologetic. NATO, we should keep our open door policy. We should not recognize Crimea as in the invasion as legal in any sense, and we should say the annexation is illegal. And we can agree, we should pursue diplomacy as far as possible to prevent a Russian invasion. But to say that Russia is invading Ukraine for the security of Russia is foolhardy, period. That's my view. And again, I don't know if it's your view in the Fidalgo Democrats, but I've told you I will give you my answer, not your answer.
Thank
to
you.
these things. Yeah. And on QAnon and basically the right wing who's funding it, I don't know the answer to that. I wish I did know the answer to that. I'm sure there are people who know the answer to that. I've just never thought of looking because I oppose all those. I think they're nuts. I think they're crazy. I think, we have a January 6th committee right now looking at the domestic terrorism that was foisted upon the United States and specifically at the Capitol on January 6th, 2021. Those folks they were and they are domestic terrorists. And the January 6th committee is continuing to peel away the layers on that. And so far, all roads lead to the Trump White House related to the January 6th attack, domestic terrorist attack on the U.S. Capitol and on democracy. I will say this, I was there that day though, and not in the Capitol building, many were. I was not, I was in my office across the street. Told to, lock your doors, stay quiet, stay away from the windows. It's not a typical day in the U.S. Capitol or on Capitol when the Capitol Police tell you those kinds of things. And but I never doubted that by the end of the day, at least it was 3:30 in the morning, the next morning, that we would accomplish our task, and that was to confirm the election of Biden and Harris as the president and vice president of the United States. Nothing those foolhardy terrorists did caused me to doubt for 1 second that our democracy would move forward that day. And it just happened a little later, but it happened well before January 20th when we had the swearing in. Now we got to keep it. Now we got to keep working at it. and so support these women and men who are on the January 6th committee, because they are doing, they can't think about anything else. These members of Congress, I've talked to them about other things, tried to, and they're just like, bother me later. This thing is all consuming. There's just a lot of work to do. So keep them in mind as well as we move forward. They're doing yeoman's work for our democracy. Thanks.
Thank you, Congressman. I appreciate it. Thanks.
Sure.
Okay, I do want to let you know that this is a pretty independent group. We do educational programs, but it's, as they say, it's like herding cats. So
That's
everyone
fine.
has their opinion, and
As I do as well.
So I do appreciate, I just want to let you know, this is not everyone has the same opinions, you can be sure.
No. Well, I would note too, my district, in this district, out of 435 districts in the country, the second congressional district has the 16th highest number of Ukrainian Americans.
Oh, really?
16th out of 435. So we have quite a number of folks who fled after the fall of the Soviet Union because they could. And I hear from your neighbors as well, who are Ukrainians, who fully support my position on this. But as well, it's still important to pursue diplomacy as far as we can. And I think the German leader is there today. I won't say when, but soon I'll be meeting with parliamentarians from the NATO countries. So my congressional counterparts in their parliaments, to kind of, do our consultations about what next steps and what we can support as a body to support our countries and support Ukraine, so that it can be free and independent and democratic like we are.
Okay, thank you. Okay, are there any, I don't see any other hand raising right at the moment. Do we have any other questions for? Well, I have a couple, if I'm not
Sure.
supposed to, but I do have one. I'm kind of curious of what's happening with the post office. Because
Yeah.
that's an area that we are.
Yeah, sure. So first off, I want Louis DeJoy on too. It's something that the president has to orchestrate, and that means appointing people to the U.S. Postal Service board, who then take that action, and so he has that opportunity. Separate from that, we did pass a postal reform bill last week out of the U.S. House. It's in the Senate. There's a lot of bipartisan support for it in the House and in the Senate, and so expect to see some action on that. And that's going to do the big thing. If I had to emphasize one thing about this bill, it isn't electrifying the postal fleet, which is a great idea, and we should do that. The one thing that I want to emphasize in this bill is that it will get rid of the what we call the pre-funding provisions of the Postal Service pension. Now, we put that in 2006, and I voted for it when the economy was doing great, and it was a really good economic decision in 2006. It's not 2006 anymore, so the great thing about this bill is that it repeals that pre-funding requirement. We call it the pre-funding requirement. That's going to free up cash for the Postal Service, because they're required to pre-fund this pension, and now it's really it's overfunded, and so it's going to free up cash for Postal Service operations, and they'll still have to put money into the pension. That's not the issue. It's just how much they have to put in, and so that, I mean, that in and of itself will be a real boon to continued operations. It also guarantees 6-day service like we have today, and will help maintain the competitiveness of the U.S. Postal Service.
And there's nothing in there then about the electric cars or any of that? Is that an electric vans.
It's really not the most important thing, I would argue. Saving the Postal Service is the most important thing, but the president and the administration's been clear about stopping the Postal Service from moving forward on replacing its fleet with diesel spewing, with more diesel spewing cars and vehicles, and rather begin that transition for the postal fleet to electric vehicles.
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone else who'd like to ask a question?
Sir,
Okay, Rosemary.
is there any way we can, I have a couple of questions, but is there any way without replacing more people on in that committee to get rid of DeJoy? He is
I don't think there is. I don't think there is.
okay. My other question is this, and this may be too weird, but we are just, we have all of these people, or not all these people. There are people that are putting out so much misinformation, like QAnon and all these groups. Is the government investigating and trying to find out who they are and shut them down?
It's not illegal in this country to spew misinformation, so you have to be really careful about using the government to chase down views you don't like. It is not legal to incite violence against the government in the United States. To incite people to action in the United States. So that's a different proposition altogether. But I would note that whether you like what people are saying or you don't like what people are saying, that's not an investigatable crime in the United States. It is in Russia. It is not here, and I'm glad it is not an investigatable crime. But inciting violence against the government, actual violence against the government, is conspiracy, and that can be investigated. So, we have really strong laws in place to investigate things that endanger the government, not a party, but the government. But on the other hand, we really like our freedom to speak as well. And that includes the freedom to say really offensive things. Fortunately, we can openly criticize people who say really offensive things as well. And we aren't stopped from doing that. And we need to exercise that. But as far as, look, if I was aware that we were investigating QAnon through our FBI, I couldn't tell you anyway. So, and I'm not giving you a wink and a nod on this. I'm just telling you, if I knew that, I couldn't tell you, but I don't know that. And there are other people in Congress who have a job and oversight that it is their job to know those kinds of things. And, you don't ask those questions sometimes of other members. So.
I'm sorry, it just makes me cranky.
Well, I appreciate that. And I want you to take that crankiness and turn it into action. Keep Democrats in office. So we have, yeah. And I will say, I'll get actually ask Spencer to get me a better answer on what steps it would take to replace a postmaster general. So thanks.
Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, is there anyone else who has other questions? Okay. Here we have.
Yeah, Sue Weingarten. Let's see, Sue. Hands up.
Oh, there you are.
It's got to unmute there, Sue. It's still muted. There you go.
For once, nobody can hear me. You said it was illegal to incite violence against the government.
Right.
I have a family that left Germany and who is now worried about the fact that we might have to leave this country. Not because of necessarily violence against the government, because of violence against ethnic groups, minorities, liberals, anything. It seems very, very dangerous. I don't know if there's something you can do about it or Congress, but to me, it's scary. We're talking about where to move.
Yeah. Well, I know that there are groups in the United States, including Jews, including folks of Asian descent as well. Certainly Black Americans, all for different reasons, feeling under siege. And I'm not trying to equate any one group to another group. They all have their different reasons why and different historical reasons why. And fortunately, there are laws in this country against violence against anyone. And we need to ensure that our federal agencies, so the FBI and the Department of Justice, actively pursue the cases where there's threats of violence against individuals or groups, and prosecute those to the fullest extent of the law. And that means funding those. So at the Department of Justice, it means in part funding the Civil Rights Division and having a strong attorney general who is willing to pursue those cases. It also means having an attorney general in Merrick Garland who ought to be concerned enough to put the heft of the DOJ behind legitimate investigations of groups like organized groups like QAnon as it's organized, or the Proud Boys, which frankly, there's a lot of good arguments to do that, given the fact that some of these folks who've been involved in these groups have been prosecuted under the law for January 6th attacks on the Capitol. Look, I recognize certainly family's history. I know it fairly well, and I know from whence you speak when you say what you're saying, and you're deadly serious about what you're saying. And we need to ensure that electeds and parties take the opportunity to speak up, not for political purposes, but to speak up about against attacks, verbal attacks, physical attacks on people who historically have been marginalized. Otherwise, we're not really living up to what this country stands for a lot of people.
My question would be, what happens if the election goes south? Not regional.
I don't know what do you mean south? If Democrats lose a majority, or
if enough of the wackadoodles get in. That's probably not very politic, but
I'm prepared to win. So that's where I'm headed. You still have to follow the law. You still can't pass laws that are unconstitutional.
Yeah.
You still can't. There's still checks and balances in the system, and so, well, there are checks and balances in the system. I mean, I had a bit of a tete-a-tete with. For those who don't speak French, it means head-to-head. A tete-a-tete with someone in the last election, not in this group, but in a Democratic group in South Snohomish County, who just told me I was totally wrong about the Supreme Court when it came to voting rights. And I wasn't wrong with regards to the last decision, but with regards to whether or not this Supreme Court had a majority position on ensuring that all votes that were cast be counted, I was right. And there's nothing to indicate that the Supreme Court, as currently constituted, would not allow all votes in a presidential election to be counted. Now, it has other problems on redistricting and a few other things. There's no doubt about it. But so now we're in a position where we have to fight to ensure that people get their vote in, so that it can be counted, because the Supreme Court will support it being counted. but we have to, go into Texas and go into Georgia and go into Florida and fight to be sure that people get that ballot, and vote it, and get it in the proverbial ballot box or the actual ballot box.
Well, from your mouth to God's ears.
It's my life for the last 22 years. It's not any different. We got to vote for. I mean, we got to fight for our democracy every day.
Any other
Thanks.
questions? I have one. Looks like I'm going to ask another one. I just was wondering, we don't hear a whole lot about immigration lately. I was just wondering what's happening with that.
Shorthand is not much is happening with that. We tried to get an immigration reform package folded into the Build Back Better bill, but it got tossed out under the arcane rules of reconciliation. So it's not really worth getting into here. But I am one of the few members of the U.S. House of Representatives who's still there, who voted for the DREAM Act in the 2000s. So I have a strong history of supporting Dreamers and for supporting immigration reform. And we still need to pass a strong immigration reform bill that provides a pathway to citizenship for folks. So I'm still all in on that, but I don't expect between now and the end of the year that we'll be taking that up.
Okay, thank you. Are there any more questions? Then I'd like to ask one, not a real question, but how can we help Democrats sell their agenda? I just feel that a lot of good stuff is happening, and all you hear about is negative, negative, negative. And it makes me crazy, because I know that there's some wonderful things that the Democrats have done. Have they done everything? Probably not. But how do we help you sell the good things that are happening and that have happened? I really
well, you can flood the zone. If a local newspaper gets 75 letters on an issue, all saying this XYZ is good, they've got to print one of them. If they get one letter, they can ignore it because they got plenty of one-off letters from people. So if there's locally working on letter writing campaigns on key issues is important. I'd pick job creating infrastructure. I would pick the value of the child care tax credit. I'd pick the $35 copay on limiting copays on insulin at $35 that's in the Build Back Better, in the House version of the Build Back Better. I would certainly pick those things. You got to be sure that we use those organs for publishing organs to communicate to folks, but also with social media. I don't know if Fidalgo Democrats have a social media site or how you do that, but tweeting, Facebooking, whatever format you use, using those and getting into the conversation, whether it's getting into the 40th District Democrats or the Skagit County Democrats online conversation, so that you're part of that conversation. I would also just say that you have to. I would spend zero time worried about the negative, and all of my time worried about what can I do to accentuate what Democrats have done.
right.
There's plenty of people saying what we haven't done. Unfortunately, some of those folks are Democrats.
Right.
But we're really good at that, and I just don't need any more Democrats being really good at that.
Yeah. Okay, good. Thank you. I totally understand what you're saying. So looks like Valit, it looks like you have your hand up again.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Barbara. Congressman, again, thank you very much for all your time. And I know this is a lot of effort, and I apologize for my pointed questions. But I'm going to piggyback on Susan's question. Now, Christopher Wray, the FBI director, please correct my memory. He is a Trump appointee, isn't he?
Probably. I don't know.
So
let's say
So-
let's say yes. Yeah, sure.
So here we work our rears off, excuse the expression, to elect you and especially Mr. Biden. And then the guy is leaving, Christopher Wray 12 months after he takes over in charge. And here we are expecting him to go in and investigate the Trumpies. I mean, I'm sorry, it just doesn't add up.
Do you have a complaint about anything Christopher Wray has done, as opposed to just the fact that he was a Trump appointee?
Did you listen to any of his comments when he gets up?
Do you have any complaints about what Christopher Wray has done, as opposed to being just a Trump appointee?
Congressman, he is not doing anything to investigate any of these Trumpies. I'm sorry. Maybe he's doing it behind the scenes. Similarly,
You may not know that it is not customary practice in the United States for law enforcement to advertise their investigations. That's true. That is true.
all right, okay, maybe that's it. And the Attorney General, I'm sorry, he looks like a blue stone in the ocean. He sank into the bottom. We don't hear anything from him. We have no idea what he's doing. He is not supporting the administration. And I'm sorry, it's just very frustrating. And
I hear the frustration. Yeah.
Please do something. I mean, whisper to somebody's ears. Anyway, sorry. That's I'm venting a little bit. My apology.
No,
Don't apologize for venting. You do not need to apologize for that.
okay. Going to wait a couple more minutes. Is there anyone else who would like to ask some questions or have some comments? Well, in that case, I think we will, what I'm going to say is we're going to thank you again for coming. I really appreciate you taking the time, especially on Valentine's Day.
Sure. I love the Democrats, so that's why I'm here.
Okay. I hope your wife does too. And really
She does,
appreciate you doing that. I always want to thank Brad because he's just wonderful for making it happen.
Oh yeah,
And-
thanks, Brad.
And also thank Rita, who will put together the YouTube with the help of Brad and send it out. And we'll get a lot of people listening to that and watching that. And if people want to stick around and talk after the meeting, I'll be here for a few minutes and we can, just chat if you want to. If not, feel free to leave and go about your business. So I'm going to call the meeting to an adjournment, except for people who would like to stick around.
All right.
So
Yeah, thanks a lot,
thank you.
everyone. Good to see a lot of you. I will call out Dave Allen, especially. Good to see you again, David, and Sue Weingarten, who again, I won't tell you how far back I know Sue Weingarten, but it's at least a high school.
Good to see you, Rick, and thank you for all you do.
Right.
Okay,
Thank
thanks a
you
lot.
so much.
Either Rick,
Okay.
both ways.
I'll see you later.
Okay, thanks again. Okay. So if anyone would like to just visit, we have
Yeah, thank you, Barbara. It was a good meeting. But I'm sorry, I'm very disappointed with the congressman.